Welcome to the Evolve, Move, Play podcast, where we bring you the most interesting and enlightening conversations around movement practice and how you can become the most heroic version of yourself through pursuing movement that's relevant to your nature. This is a podcast that's going to feature some of the top movers in the world, some of the most amazing movement thinkers, and people from fields that are related to movement as far afield as evolutionary theory, strength and conditioning, and everything in between. So if you're interested in movement, please stick around. And if you like our work and want to support it, please consider supporting us on Patreon, because this podcast is completely listener supported. We don't want to take any advertising. We don't want to interrupt your experience of watching the show. So what really helps us get the best thinkers on, have the time to put these together, have the best quality for you guys as far as audio and video, is your support. So please consider supporting us and enjoy the rest of the show. Welcome back to the Evolve, Move, Play podcast. My guest this week is Saša Ševo. Saša is a very experienced parkour coach and the founder of Scotchy Pistics, which is a parkour clothing company. He's from the former Yugoslavia, and he's taught all over Europe and the States with various organizations. He's a really interesting thinker in how we can apply movement training, and a very interesting teacher. So I was really excited to dig into his experience and how he built up his perspective on movement training, on parkour training, and kind of what that looks like in a broader philosophical context. So without further ado, I present Saša Ševo.
So first of all, first question, is your first name Ševo or Saza?
Saša. Saša is my first name.
So
Ševo is my last name. Yes.
Saša Ševo.
Yes, we often in Serbia write opposite first last name and then the first name, so people get confused. But most of the people actually here call me just by my last name, so it's like easier to put your last name first.
Okay. So, well, I'll call you Saša for the podcast. So Saša, you popped onto my radar years ago. I was talking about some of the best coaches in the parkour industry, and most everyone that I could name was in North America and just a few in England. And so some folks were like, well, where are the Europeans on this list? And I said, I don't know. You tell me. Who are the Europeans on this list? And one of the first people that got mentioned was you. And they said that your coaching was really exceptional. And then you approached me just like last year, I think, about trying out some of your garments, Scotchy sticks. And that's it.
You need to practice a little bit, but people will know maybe.
Maybe
you can just call it Scotchy. It's easier.
Scotchy. Okay. Yeah. So you and we had a chance to have a little bit of a conversation then, and it turned out that we had a lot of common interests in what we were thinking about as far as movement and the philosophy behind movement. I know you're also kind of interested in Jordan Peterson and some of the mythic architecture, storytelling aspect of movements. So just before we go on, what would be great is to get kind of an introduction to who you are, what you've been doing in the movement community, how long you've been involved, and kind of what the different elements of your project are.
Okay. So I will easily, thank you for hosting me first, and I'm happy to do this interview with you. I will introduce myself. I'm coming from Eastern Europe. Usually people ask me, where are you from? And then I get confused with that question because our country, the country where I'm born, actually it doesn't exist anymore because the war happened. So I'm born in Yugoslavia, but now there are 7 different countries. Mm-hmm. So I don't want actually to put myself, I'm this one or this one, Croatian or Serbia, whatever. So I just will say Yugoslavia or Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. War was a bad thing, but we don't have a winner in this war. So I don't like to put me in specific, if I'm Serbian or not, it doesn't mean like we are all humans and we are trying to be better every day. My parkour journey is starting in 2005. Just before it started, I had some really bad injury. Car accident, and then after that car accident I was recovering for a year, something like that. And my motivation to get doing some physical work, it was first my father, because at that time he was training a lot. He was 40 something, and he was doing push-ups, running. He was doing handstands and stuff like that. And he was just in front of my face almost every day doing some stuff, and I was laying in the bed recovering from this car accident. And somehow, with kind of watching him, he implanted that idea in my head that I want to be like him or something similar. I want to do that stuff. I want to be able to do that, or maybe go beyond that. I didn't know at the time, but this was like some kind of reflection. And then it catch me. Then eventually I start trying to do handstands and stuff like that. Then didn't really work for me. He also was saying a lot of times, you should do, you're so lazy, you're just playing PlayStation, blah, blah, blah. You should do more push-ups and stuff like that. At your age, I was doing this and that and that. I was so crazy and skilled and so on. But also he knew I could not do really all that stuff because I was injured. But he was just like, I don't know what was his, idea, but it worked on then because I start training and start doing some of that stuff, but not when he was looking, because he kind of annoyed me with all these words, I did this, I did that, blah, blah. So when he's at work, I was training. When he came back home, I go play PlayStation for a couple of months. I was 15, yeah. And then a little bit more than 15, sorry, because I started like training parkour about when I had 17. So my first challenge was to do a handstand, and it took me, I think, 2 or 3 months to like do a kind of a handstand. And then one day when I was ready to show it, to him, he was coming back from work, and I was doing handstand in the garden, and then he came and like just passed me and go to the house, and then. Like, I was like, what the fuck, what happened? He didn't notice I did a handstand, like, and then I run in the house and like, do you see that? And he's like, what, that? You call that handstand? That's just a shit forms ever. And they're like, what? Like, fuck, I invest 2 months in this, and then you just like drown it. So that's actually how I get started in doing some physical things. And then when I actually start doing more repetitions, more physical work, then I did my first handstand even better, blah, blah. And then I asked him after a couple of months, like, okay, can you walk down the stairs in the handstand? And then he told me, oh, no, I never did that. So that was my own challenge that I will create for me, and then dedicate my time to do it. And it took me again for a couple of months, and then I did that. And then after that, I got a CD with some parkour people jumping around the UK, I think. And then I start copying them and trying to do that kind of moves.
It would have been like Jump Britain at that time, right?
No. It was training day 1 or something like this from Chase Armitage or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was for these guys, but it was just a year before YouTube, like 2005.
Yeah.
When I get that video. Yeah, and then just copy, try to crash a lot of times. But eventually worked.
Did your father have like a gymnastics background, or where was all that calisthenics stuff?
No background. So the childhood was quite wild and crazy because of all the war. War happened when I had war started when I had when I was 3 years old, but the war was for 5 years going on. So after the war, when I settled with my family in Serbia, because I'm born in Croatia, so that people get confused. And when I moved there, so my growing up was quite hard in terms that my parents couldn't really, give me opportunity to train something and pay to do some sport. So I grew up kind of wildly. I was training climbing trees and stuff, jumping around, like, and doing a lot of things, playing basketball and some other sports with the guys in the neighborhood, but nothing specific. Then from the moment when I discovered this kind of new discipline, I just fell in love straight away. And I said, like, I will do this.
Yeah, for me as well. So you just saw the one video and you were hooked?
Yeah, literally. I mean, I was hooked probably even before the video when I followed the stories of my father. Not just the stories.
Yeah.
He did a lot of things in front of me, but then he was also telling me the story that he was climbing on the top of the electric pillow. How do you call it? Yeah, we had in the village wooden ones, and then he climbed like in 12 seconds on the top of that, and then he sits on the top of that, like, and then he tell me these stories like this, and then what he did when he was young, and doing all these flips and stuff, and then kind of I was already hooked there. But then when I saw it in the video, I said, oh fuck, this is possible, and then that was it. That was not going back from that point.
So that's interesting. So your father learned to do flips and things like that without having a formal education.
Yes.
But you didn't, despite having lots of wild time in the woods.
Yeah, everywhere. Like I think I don't have the, like, I just did things when I was, because I had this freedom. My parents I didn't have restricted time. So my parents was working all day when they moved to Serbia to earn money to buy kids what they need. Yeah. And then I spent a lot of time alone. So when I was alone or with my sister, I was doing a lot of physical stuff and climbing trees and climbing around the house and like just exploring in general, like what people calling today like urban exploration. I was just like, as a kid, if I go from school, I will jump all the time like this over the water or over some fences, climb the tree, go back, and I don't know. It was a lot of freedom, and in that freedom, something was growing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't grow up with a war-torn in an war-torn country, but very safe, But my dad also kind of grew up doing epic things, and he didn't tell me about it really. I heard it through the grapevine, but it's like as I started doing parkour and stuff, people were like, "Oh yeah, your dad used to build these epic rope swings, and he climbed the waterfall at Wacom Falls Park way before I did." He was." When he was in his late 40s, he kind of like went out and onto a diving board, just did a perfect front flip dive. I'd never seen him flip before.
Yeah.
And so the same, and I asked him about it, and he's like, in school, basically, they were tumbling and doing front handsprings and back handsprings and flips. And that was just part of the lifestyle of kids in his generation.
Yeah.
And so I've attributed why that kind of stopped in my generation to kids getting sort of funneled into structured sports and out of like having playtime. Also increases in homework and fear of letting kids outdoors, and then the rise of video games. But then, like, listening to your story, it sounds like a different story. Like, have you ever asked like why your dad was doing this stuff when he was 15 without knowing about parkour? But for you, it took kind of seeing parkour to start down the same path.
It's hard. I mean, for example, they had also interesting period actually growing up in that time when my parents were growing up. It was also culture of physical activity. It was Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and Jackie Chan was just starting. Bruce Lee was quite active, and I remember my father doing all this with the nunchucks and lifting other things. It was we are kind of, if now in era of this kind of movement culture things, but it's, of course, in the help of internet, we have access to all of these things. And at that time they had the cinema and the Bruce Lee, and then a lot of people was copying him and trying to do these kind of things, at least in the village where my father was. So also they have a background of doing a lot of physical work in the farming. So back in the village, we have a lot of peaches, watermelons, potatoes, and stuff like. It's a lot of physical work because you need to kind of to take care of all these fruits and veggies. And then when he go and work there, he will also implement, like if he go and to water some plants, and he just need to drive a tractor with 3,000 liters of water, and you just put it down. The water goes out, and then you need to wait for 30 minutes that happens. So in that 30 minutes, he will climb the tractor and do flips over from the tractor on the ground and stuff. He's watching movies, and then with that idea, when he go to the farming, he implement that idea from the movie in his lifestyle on on the village, even if he was probably maybe the only one in the village he was doing that. But you got the point. Like, it was maybe not so maybe not everybody get that idea. Like today, so many people are getting so fast into all these disciplines and trainings, but it's same, but just the smaller amount of people did the same things before.
Do you know if your dad had other friends who were doing that with him, or was he kind of alone doing it by himself?
Mostly alone, because I remember a lot of his stories goes like when he was doing, because every family in the village, they have their own business, with the farming. So everybody go in their own fields, and then a lot of stories like he's going doing with their parents work in the vineyard, for example, and then they finish and then he will run home. So they're going back with the tractor and he will run back to prepare lunch for them. Mm-hmm. Because it was much faster to run, because you can take a shortcut, and then also tractor needs to go slow on the farming roads and blah, blah, blah. So it's a lot of stories where a lot of things did alone. So that's probably some other people did some other things, but in the village it's a lot of freedom, and you could do a lot of stuff with that. For them that was nothing special, probably a lot of kids was being active on a different types.
I asked because one of my theories is that what happened in the past a lot of times was that there was a play culture where there would be a lot of unstructured play that was participated in by all of the kids who are kind of young enough to not have work and old enough to be away from their mothers. Like in 104 Troops, it's like 4 years old to 12 years old is sort of the free play era of childhood. And all of the kids who are in that age group will essentially get together and play all the time.
Yeah.
And what I think happens there is that you get this kind of network effect where they figure out interesting things to do, and they find all the cool places in their environment, and they find games to play that make them physically intelligent. And I think that when those kids get sort of shuffled into school soccer and things like that, then that play culture can break down when they're doing too much curriculum, or they're prevented from going outside. And so a lot of the kind of intrinsic system by which people develop physical intelligence and strength is taken away. And so I think that's one of the big problems. I was actually reading a paper, I'll probably post about this, about I think pelota, which is it's the culture of Brazilian pickup soccer. Mm-hmm. They're talking about how when kids go out to play, they'll play in a mixed age group. All the kids in the village will kind of be there, mixed age, mixed gender. And when you're waiting for your team to get a chance to play, you might climb a tree, you might do some flips, you might dance, you might wrestle, you might go swimming.
Yeah.
Like all those activities just tend to happen around this central game. And I think that's where a lot of these older generations, like my dad's generation, your generation, they kind of knew how to use their body in the same way that parkour athletes are learning now, but it was happening without having a name. It was just kids playing.
Yeah, of course, but also they didn't have, these toys to distract their time, so that's also, I mean, they also did a lot of things, as you said, like as groups. I know also the things they were doing before, like he will go with the friend and they will swim over some part of the sea, like swimming for 5, 6 or even more kilometers. Or every Sunday they have this tradition to go and to diving to get the mussels, for the sea. And like every Sunday they were diving for 5, 6, 10 meters down without any equipment, and just put like 30 kilos, put out of the water 30 kilos of this, and just to have for Sunday lunch, because every Sunday that was kind of tradition. But also the stories also that I remember from even older generation, like grandmother told me once that she was like one of the most skilled in the village when she climbed, only one from the girls in the village climbed like the 30 meters tree and stuff. Like there was a specifically high tree tall tree in the somewhere around the village, and then boys was always climbing it, and then she's like, oh, I can do that, and then she climbed it, and like shit on like, oh, I was the only girl who climbed this and stuff like that. They was always saying some different kind of the games, like in the middle of this work, if they're going to do farming or they're going to do something on the sea or whatever, they always have something to do on the way, because that was like today, if you're going somewhere, you do this and then you just type and watch in the screen and you're not thinking what you can do. But if you're not watching in this, if you just watch, like look around you, there is a rock, there is a tree, there is a river, there is a path, there is a city, there is a wall. If we don't have this, we'll probably do much more. So they didn't have distraction, and then that also kind of to adapt their bodies to the environment in different ways. Is it a game? Is it a challenge? Is it the need? Is it the food? Whatever it is, just natural.
Yeah, it seemed like my kind of perception of this, and you can tell me if you think this is the case, but it's like modernization disturbed the play culture for my generation. And for you, it sounds like war disturbed the play culture. It's like all those traditions and things were disrupted because you guys were moving around, you were afraid, you were hiding, you didn't have as many kids to play with, maybe. Is that the case?
No, really, actually, because it's strange, but in the war, actually, it was a lot of play, because, you don't go to the school, even if war is happening, bombs will happen eventually, but people actually get socialized much more. Because they know, for example, there's going to be some kind of bombing or something, then just stay in the house, or they go, everybody gather around place and they talk and then play cards and stuff like that. So from that perspective, it's hard. They don't have all what they need, but they socialize a lot. They talk, they do stuff together.
Interesting.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting point. But because I've been through 2 wars, fortunately. So there is a first one started in 91 to 95 in territory of all Yugoslavia. I mean, Croatia, Bosnia, and Serbia. And when that finished, 95, we moved out because of the nationalities, blah blah blah. So in Serbia was bombed by USA and NATO in 99. So just a couple of years after everything was finished, another war started, and we were bombed for 7 or 8 months, something like that. So at that time, school was not working or anything. So, there were sirens when the bombing is, and then when sirens go back, everybody go out and play. Because, so quite crazy, but it's human nature. We cannot stay in the basement or something, forever. Just like the first window, you got opportunity to do something, or you have freedom, you will live, enjoy life.
Yeah, I guess
as much as possible.
Got to do it, when you get a chance. Well, that's kind of a long tangent. It's really interesting to me, though. These cultural aspects and the history of movement is really powerful. So, but the original question was kind of how you came to do parkour, and we've arrived at being 17 years old and starting parkour. That's as far as we've gotten. So how you came to become a teacher and a leader in your community, how you started Scoppy Sticks, and how you kind of going.
We'll go to the point. So for 2005, after the first challenge, after copying other things from the video, it was interesting because I have only one video, to watch, and then you go and study that video so deeply, every move, and then you go out and try. You don't succeed, you fall, you come back, you watch again and again. You study that one video, and then you're going out and practice until you kind of do that thing. And that was, I think, also very interesting because you get one video every couple of months, and also dial-up internet was so slow and stuff like that. It was like you're waiting for 3 hours to download like 3 megabytes of video. Especially in Serbia, internet came really a bit later, and also really slow connection. So I don't know, all that kind of, you didn't have that information, so you need to wait, and you need to dig, and you need to explore to find something about that. So that helped a lot because I was really digging into it. And then I had some friends training with in that small city, but that actually they very fast stopped training. And then I had this idea that if I want to continue training this discipline, I need to move to a bigger city, because then I find out there is some other people training parkour in Serbia at the moment. So I moved to second biggest city in Serbia with the idea to train. So to do that, I finished my high school, and with no money to go to higher education, I decided that also I break my arm, slipped by walking on the rain. That's important. So I couldn't. I had idea to go to the sports science university, but I couldn't do it. One of the reasons was money. Another reason was that I break my arm a couple of weeks before the testing. We need to do running, swimming, and stuff like that, and I couldn't do it because I had a broken arm. So I find a job, and I moved to the bigger city. So I worked to pay apartment so I can train. So I worked to pay apartment so I can train. So I started working every day for 7-8 hours, and then after work I was training, and that was going on for 6 years almost. So every day work. So when I started training this discipline, I didn't have all this freedom with a lot of free time, and so my training was really focused. Look, so I finish work, I go out, I have like 3 hours, maximum 4 hours maybe, to invest in training, and then I will give everything I have. I will push my body all the way until then. So I was going home completely destroyed. Sometimes I will do so much conditioning that I couldn't walk back home, or I will puke or something like that. And then it was interesting also because when I moved to the other city to train with other people, there was mostly my friends who was training at the time was college students or high school or something like that. So nobody had work, but they had school. So when I work in the morning, they sleep or in the school, and then we train together afternoon. But when I'm working afternoon, I'm only one who is training in the morning. Nobody wants to join me in the morning. So that was also one of the so good lessons, because I had all the time I had this training alone, and that's very important, I think, in this discipline. And you need to discover what you can do alone, how you can organize your training, how you can fight the fears when you're alone. If you get injured or something, how you will go home. You have all these different things. What are you thinking about when you go alone for training? When you go to friends, it's much more relaxed. You always talk about something. You talk about how to solve the problem of this jump, or how you will go from here to there, blah, blah, blah. There is always also a lot of benefits. I think both of these aspects of training are very, very important when you train alone and when you train with other people. So I had very good balance that, because every week I was training alone. Another week I will be training with my friends.
So I think this is a good topic to dig into slightly as another tangent, but I agree that there's a necessity really for someone to practice alone and also in a group. And I think there's kind of distinct benefits that you get from them. So I'm curious what you see as the benefits of the alone time and of the group coordination time.
Yeah, there is benefits in everything, of course. I think the benefits is, like, first, the biggest obstacle is to go out alone. Especially when you're young and you don't have really experience in what are you doing and how there is a lot of, I remember there is a lot of hits at the time. You land bad and you get spread ankle and stuff like that. So one of the first obstacles was just go out and train alone, and then what you can do, and then sometimes you spend half hour just thinking about what kind of training you can do. It was 2006, 7, 8, and it was just it's 1 or 2, 3 years in the experience. So a lot of time was I go out and I don't have idea what I will do. And then when I go to the spot, and then, oh, look at this, I will jump here, and then la, 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 or I will do repetition of this jump, and so on. So there is a first obstacle is just go alone and figure out what you will do, definitely. And then one of my biggest devils, I will say, when I was training alone, it was other people. Parkour was not so much known at the time, and people had really bad reaction when see you doing something outside. And one of the biggest fear was exactly that. I go out to do some stuff, and then people, for example, it was some cafe or something close to me, and then they will just say a lot of bad things to me, and I was doing quadrupede or balancing or something, and they will say, "Oh, you monkey, go home, what are you doing, why are you so dirty, blah blah blah." So when you had 19 or 20, and then you get this information from outside, from really, I mean, older people definitely, and then you need to create the isolate, and then try not to listen, or try to not have the impact from all that words that what are you telling. And then you kind of, I mean, probably one of the biggest obstacles is that you believe what are you doing, and then to kind of to create protection, kind of isolation from outside world. It's like when you're jumping, you cannot really listen to something what's happening around. You need to focus for a jump. It's same here. Like, you need to forget what's happening outside if you want to do something. If you come here to do a training, then of course, if you're doing something really bad and destroying someone's flowers, of course then you need to move. But like, if you're doing something normal standards, when you're just doing precision jump on the bar or something, that's one of the biggest obstacles that you as a young person can actually pass it, obstacle from impact from outside world. I think that's one of the most important things. And then after, of course, there's another benefits with just you in your head always calculating, thinking what ideas you can come. A lot of things happen when you're alone, and then your mind gets completely alone, and it's just you and your body and the obstacles.
Yeah, there's more. I feel like there's a couple, like maybe to clarify it as a benefit, there's two things there. One is psychological toughness, right? Being able to
yes. Sorry for my English as well, because I don't have all these words, but yeah, you can put a stamp on it.
I think it's interesting because, like, Washington State is a very different place from Serbia. And so I was also a grown man. I was 23 when I started. I personally experienced essentially almost zero harassment from training right from the start. Like, I had someone laugh at me one day when I slipped. I had a woman who came and yelled at us for jumping over her flower beds. But that's pretty much it. Like, once, or then we had the cops called on us once, and the cops were like, "Yeah, there's no rule against jumping off stuff." It's a really passive culture here. People don't really approach and talk to you on the street. And it's pretty open and liberal. So we didn't really have that. But the interesting thing is that I would say that even still, for a majority of the people who practice, just the idea that other people are watching them and judging them is one of the biggest limitations to actually taking on discipline that involves going outside in public.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there's an element of psychological toughening and of recognizing when it's important to actually care about other people's judgments of you. And that's a huge lesson to learn, because if we allow other people's judgments of us to sort of always be weighing on our minds, it can really limit us from pursuing what we care about, and just distract us and burn our psychological energy to no end. So that was the first thing that I heard there. And the second one was, it's almost, I think the way that I think about it is that when you're on your own, it's a bit more contemplative. You're sort of thinking about what's happening in a way, whereas a lot of times when you're training with people, it's happening a lot faster, and it's a lot more driven by emotion and fun. And having that quiet practice of looking at the environment and asking what you can do, it trains your mind in a different way.
Definitely. I agree. And also there is a thing that I like to say, I feel the trees, I feel how they breathe and what jump I can catch without breaking it. Because when you spend the time alone using all these things around, then you kind of get to know, and by just you kind of recognize, is this tree old enough? Will it break it? Or is this, these kind of things. And then you can learn so much by being alone, training alone, surrounded with obstacles, training in the nature, in the city. It doesn't important. It's just that I think the time, I don't agree with some people and say, okay, I will dedicate only 1.5 hours and I will do much more than some people in 5 hours. I don't really agree on that, because I think that just standing there and absorbing all this information from outside, like from all around you, will benefit you a lot. I think the time is actually that experience and everything that comes from real, like by just by feeling all this what's happening around you. It's very important. And if you come for 1.5 hour very hard session, like, okay, of course you will destroy your legs. I mean, you'll pump the muscles, you will do a lot of benefits for your muscle, but then you will not absorb everything else that comes with that, you know.
Yeah.
So I think everything is important. Also, that kind of training is important as
sometimes
this kind
it's
of
all you can do, right? I'm an
yeah,
entrepreneur and a father of 3. It's like, if I can get out for a 2-hour session is really good. 5-hour session is not going to happen very often for me. But I agree with you. I think that I was thinking about this. I remember sort of when I first was training, we'd have these very long sessions. And a lot of times when we went to jams, it would be very social. People would be talking, and you know, the amount of time spent actually jumping was kind of minimal relative to the socialization. And then I ran into CrossFit and started like picking up some CrossFit ideas and like really making my sessions intense and doing repeated routes. I was like, man, I'm getting more volume in my 1.5-hour sessions on my own than I would get in a 4 or 5 hour training session, you know, at a jam.
yeah.
And I sort of like looked down on the jams at that point as really useless. But I recognize that, like, if you look at a lot of the kids, you know, and I think when you're a kid is really the best time to have this type of training because you just don't have the same demands in your life. But if you're 15, 16, 17 years old and you can go out with your friends and spend 5, 6, 8 hours a day just doing this, it's really powerful because the exposure and just being in the frame of the training for a long time, I think trains your mind in a different way. Yeah. And also you're able to get a lot more volume of total training with minimal fatigue, right? And that's huge for the neurological benefits of training.
Yeah.
So if you you know, are say out in a training session and you do a few jumps and it's cool, and then you walk to another spot and you sit down and like play Sudoku or whatever the game. You know, that little freaking game that all the kids love in parkour right now. It seems kind of like inefficient, but what it ends up being is like you're always in a really good state to try the jump when you're trying the jump, rather than being pre-fatigued, rather than being kind of worn down at the end of a session. And I think it's a really valuable thing. I'd love to have the time to do that. I'm 37. I'm not going to be able to go and be 17 again. But to all the 17-year-old kids, you know, enjoy it.
Yeah, of course, definitely. I mean, that's maybe how my or your parents' generation was before. You know, there was always in motion.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a big benefit that also people need to understand today. But you know, everybody kind of, I think, understand that after a couple of years training, and then figure when you get the job or something, then you figure out what's happening. But so I just want to say about the group trainings. Then when you also mentioned the gyms, I think in my perspective, everything was also a bit different with gyms. I never stopped on the gyms. When I go to the gym, that was like usually opportunity to train with other people. So my gym trainings was usually more double than everything, you know, like, because when you train alone or with your couple of friends, then your intensity goes like this. If you decide to go strong, you will go strong that day. But every gym usually was boom, because there is not so much people train in one city, and then when you also I didn't travel often because I was working, so I don't forget that I was having jobs. So when I got the opportunity to go for a jam, that was maybe once a year. Maybe it was like like 6-7 hours, just do as much as I can, and then I will talk after. If I can, or not, I will just sleep overnight. But usually it was training and talking a lot, and all these fun things. I remember even one day jam was happening in my city and I was working, and it was weekend, of course, and I couldn't get a day off, and I was standing like this on the window and I saw all these people pass by my company where I was working. So sad, like I cannot watch this, you know. They just walk there. They didn't train in front of they was going for the location. But I was like, come on, why I'm here? And they're like, oh, like old bastards, like fuck. So like me, you know, that's like, so when I had the opportunity to go for a jam, it will be no stopping.
Yeah, for sure.
Never stop. Yeah.
Is that still the case?
Is it still the case?
Yeah. Now that you're more established, you're working primarily in this industry.
Yeah, more or less. I like to move. I like to share movement with everybody. I enjoy. I'll move as much I can, almost all the time.
Okay.
So it's not with me. I'm preparing for a big jumps. No, I'm trying to move as much I can.
Okay, cool.
I'm preferring to spend more hours in motion than like dedicating my time to break 3 big jumps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, everything. I think both of things can be really beneficial as well. This is always a balance.
Yeah, for sure. There's you just go back and forth in your training with what you need or how you want to go or where your weaknesses are relatively. So you've been training for a few years now. You're training very intensively, it sounds like. You're training often alone. So you ended up becoming one of the teachers in the Serbian scene, and now you've been teaching also. You've taught with Parkour Generations, correct?
Yeah, I was teaching with a lot of people around. I will start the story because I actually started completely accidentally. I didn't have any idea that I will ever be teaching and giving any advices in parkour because at the time I was working, I was training, and that was all my happiness. I didn't see myself anything doing with parkour because I was thinking at that point, at that day, I was not thinking about what will happen tomorrow. And one day there is a couple of people asking me, like when I'm training or with the friends or alone, always people join new ones, and then always looking for advices. How I can do this, and then I was always there to also help, like everybody from the community. Like it was really parkour here. It's really still kind of feels really old in that terms because we like to dedicate time to other people as well and help each other. Yeah. And that's why I like to train here a lot even now, because I felt the parkour moved everywhere, but still kind of stayed the same. Anyway, back to the topic is that people are coming to me like, oh, can you show me this? Can you show me this? And how to do that? So I was showing them. And then after, I don't know, a couple of weeks or month, I figured out that I spend a lot of my training day showing other people instead of training how I used to train, kind of intense. And then I get to the idea, okay, I will train every day, but on the Sunday, I will help you, because if I help you every day, then I'm not training. Mm-hmm. And that kind of happened like that. And then first Sunday, 5 people arrive, I help them. I just help them. I train a little bit and then I help them. And then next week and next week and next week, and then more and more people come. And then okay, I think this is kind of now a class or something, whatever. No charging, everything was for free, of course. So I was getting a lot of information from the students, feedback, how I can teach, and I was learning a lot, how I can do that better, or I get idea what I can change in my practice. So that was, this is my reaction was, this is very good actually. When you talk about what you're doing, then you actually get new ideas, and everything kind of
you teaches learns.
Yeah, like wow, this is good. And then we started regular classes, only once a week, Sunday class, and nobody was paying for a year or something. Mm-hmm. And winter arrived, and everybody wanted to kind of rent some place, and then we were find some place, and then during the winter, I don't know, because of the obligation or something, the number of people at the classes started dropping, and end up that I was paying a gym for them and teaching them in the gym. And then and I was working. So I was figure out I cannot do that anymore because I didn't have money to, I was living in that city, buying food, apartment, blah, blah, fuel for the car. Maybe I cannot really afford to pay a gym as well for these people. So I stopped it, but then just a couple of months on the spring, we started 2 or 3 classes per week, and then everybody was charging paying a minimum so we can support and have the gym once a week, and 2 other trainings were outside. So that happened completely accidentally, and then I started coaching from that day, and that was 2009.
Okay, so you've been coaching for the last 10 years.
Yes, now it's 10 years. This year is going to be 10 years. But
so how'd you end up coaching around the world and getting hooked into, how did your reputation grow internationally?
I think it's also a kind of luck and accident. Maybe not, maybe just also being in the right place in the right time, kind of. I was doing that, and then some international friend from Croatia was training in Denmark. He was living there studying, and then he said to his friends that there is some people in Croatia, and then the Danish guys was arriving to Zagreb 2012, I think, or 11. Not really clear. 12, probably 12. They wanted to bring a Kelley students and train them in Croatia, and they asked me and Mirko, a friend, to show them around spots and stuff like that. So they arrived, and we were not supposed to coach them. We just showed them around, and then we kind of naturally I wanted to help out with the ideas and everything, and then we end up actually coaching half of that week. And then next year I was in Kelley in Denmark being a student, and then next 6 years I was coaching. 5 years. So they invited me 5 years back because they probably liked what we did there in Croatia, and then how we did things in Denmark first year, and then just start calling me 5 years in a row to coach on one of the biggest kind of European events. You probably heard about international gathering in Denmark.
Yes, I think so.
So that's like
international gathering, also a parkour gathering.
Yeah. I mean, it's like one of the best things that happened in my life, being there and meeting so many people around the world. And I started meeting Yamakasis in 2000. First David Bell in 2008 in Belgrade because he was filming a movie, but he was kind of asshole. So I figured out that this is not the guy that I will learn from or anything. He was just kind of annoying and a superstar doing a movie. So I just like, okay, I'm not training because of these guys. Because of this guy, I'm training because of myself. And then I actually met Malik and Charles, the first of Yamakasi. They were doing something in Serbia. I'm just going back and forwards with the years because that also was 2008 or 9. They were doing some camp in Serbia with some friend from France, and I met them. And it was a nice, interesting weekend. We were doing kind of training, performance, kind of theater, parkour theater, something like that. It was cool, but didn't actually get too much... didn't have to spend too much time with them. It was only weekend, and that was it. And then 2011, Lauron was visiting a friend in Croatia, and it was a workshop with Lauron that we all went from the first time when Yamakasi visited Croatia. And I learned a lot from that. That day was the killer day for me. And my practice completely changed that day as well, because I was training maybe hard and intense, but completely different than any Yamakasi, from the Yamakasi there. And then Lauron did something, I don't know, it's like pressing a distraction button. He kind of like show you that you need to train much more to get to another level, you know. It's something like you think you're good or strong, whatever, and then you just press the button and like suddenly nothing. It was one of the most intense training ever that I was being part of it, because the first day we arrived, we did, I think, 5 hours conditioning or 6 hours. I didn't finish everything because nobody actually didn't finish from with the numbers that he was doing, but we came quite close, and I was shaking after training, and you can see smile of his face on his face as well, because he was happy to manage to push some people so much. So it was like 2 or 3 days, I don't remember, I think it was 2 days, really intense and interesting training with Lauron. And then from that point, I kind of add a lot of things to my training and get to train a little bit more different conditioning, not a little bit, much more different conditioning, and to focus on some points that he pointed out at that time. And then, contact with Lauron, and then with the Gerlo and the Danish guys. And then in Denmark, I met a lot of people. There is like John Hedge from Scotland that pointed out Blake from Parkour Generation Americas. A lot of people from all around. There was at some point a lot of people from Parkour Generation from London. There was Fuse Hood. There is like Dominic and some other guys and Yao, and then more Yamakasis. And I was there, and everybody were there, and like I was like in a dream. And I met so many people. I trained with them. I pushed myself a lot, and kind of it just from there everything exploded in terms of teaching, because they liked how we trained there, and then so invite me next year to teach in Denmark. But also I get connection with Yamakasi guys, so I managed to train with them more in the future and teach with them in different events, and so on and so on and so on. So it was kind of the eruption point was Denmark, I think.
Okay, so you now you've been teaching in Croatia. Are you in Croatia right now or Serbia?
No, I'm in Serbia at the moment. I moved so much time actually. So I was holding regular classes in Serbia from 2009 to 2011.
Okay.
Then I moved to Croatia, capital of Croatia, Zagreb, and teach with Mirko from 2011 to 2014. And then in 2014, thanks to all this crazy connection in Denmark, I fly to US. Blake fly me there to teach for him for 3 months for Parkour Generation Americas in Boston, and did some other workshops in Canada and Pennsylvania. At the time, I met so many people again. Like there is like just more and more and more and more and more and more. And then flying back to Europe, and I spent living 7 months in Italy with Laurent. Mm-hmm. And training with him every day, and that's actually probably my most valued time. I mean, 7 months training with Laurent was probably the golden mine with training, because it's also my goal was just to follow this guy for 7 months. I didn't want to do anything else. Kind of, I didn't train so often in Milan. There is a lot of parkour people. There is another schools and stuff, but didn't actually train with them so often, because I had this opportunity once in my life probably. Mm-hmm. And I want to see how one Yamakasi trains, how one Yamakasi breathes, and what's kind of behind the practice. And it was intense. It was really intense. We were sleeping, not together, but like we were in the same apartment, sleeping, eating, training, more training. And for 7 months, it took me 2 or 3 months just to get used to it, because it was something that I never did before, the way how one Yamakasi trains. And that also probably, and then with Laurent, I was teaching probably 6 workshops or 7 workshops around Italy in that period. We did, Laurent have something called Esprit Yamak. So it was doing Esprit Yamak's workshops all around Italy, and then some of these workshops, some other Yamakasi joined, like Chao or Jan. So it was a lot of experience, and it was just kind of, again, being there in a good time, I think. And then I managed to train with almost all Yamakasi guys and teach with them on a lot of events.
Cool.
So I learned from them, I was training with them, and then I managed also to implement my ideas and the way how I train and how I move and what I bring from before, from the past. And that was what they liked. It was a lot of creativity, a lot of wildness and freedom in my movement, because I always kind of experiment. I never dedicate my time to how big jumps are. It was more movement fluidity, always exploring something. I don't know, I kind of always have some idea and then try to stick to idea for a couple of months and then see what happened. If not, just change something else.
Okay.
So yeah,
so that's good. We're an hour in now. We're finally 3 back. We've had a lot of tangents.
Time flies.
That are really useful for people to think about. So I'm now kind of the big questions that I'm really interested in specifically when I'm kind of talking to parkour people and movement culture people, is like let's call it the why, the what, and the how of the practice. And I'm interested in kind of getting people to share best practices and how they're thinking about these things in their own practice, and then also in how they're training people. So what would you say is that, people talk a lot about parkour philosophy. I'm curious what that means to you and what you think of as kind of the defining why behind what you're doing.
That's an interesting question. Also, maybe it took me an hour to explain it. I'll try to, actually, joking, try to be very quick and simple. It's, I think there is a different couple of stages or levels of how we want to call it, but I kind of everything in parkour or ADD, I don't want to forget to use that name as well, because I was a big part of using Luado plus mine. For me, what we are doing is actually not parkour, it's more ADD, because if you just look the definition of parkour, it's from A to B, and everything else, what we're doing is actually everything else. We are handstanding, we are doing a lot of exercises, we are playing, we are doing this and this. So for me, ADD is a big circle, and then parkour is just a part of ADD. But yeah.
For the audience, when you say ADD, it stands for art du déplacement.
Yes.
French for the art of displacing or moving.
Yes, actually, because it's interesting, but it's also for me now. For me, it's the same. I mean, when you looked at the what they did before, they did a big impact. But I will say that if you really want to be precise with the history, then it's ADD, and then the parkour is just a part of the ADD. But anyway, back to the point. To what is philosophy for me, and where I was going is that I kind of want to circle everything in a tracer, because for me, and I grew up in that period when there was a Stefan Vigru and still rocks around, but it's kind of a tracers area period of time when everybody have a picture of what tracer is and what is the tracer and who are the tracers and what tracers do. And I think that's kind of
I'm not sure the audience know when you're saying tracer that you're referring to the French name for a parkour practitioner, a tracer.
Yes.
Which was the name of the team that did.
Yes.
After
exactly. Yeah, but somehow I kind of in my head. So I'm just talking from my perspective now. Somehow in my head, a tracer is all of that. If you train alone, if you train with people, if you teach, if you kind of manage to get all that experience in one, then you kind of become this person. You become one of. It's not something that you get stamped and then now you're tracer. It's now you kind of. You got me here. It's a bit hard to explain in English, but I actually never tried to explain this, but now is a struggle. But I think every tracer and every practitioner who want to call himself a tracer is the person who need to experience training alone and in the groups and training with Yamakasi and overpassing all these different kind of obstacles and be able to teach. I mean that everybody are able to teach. We just need to, not everybody can teach every day. Not everybody can dedicate time to teach, but everybody can give some advice or give some knowledge to everybody. I think the idea was just passing to the new people, the new generation, to somebody who is joining. It's not just strict, I am a teacher or I'm not a teacher. I will maybe confuse you and I will confuse myself as well, because I don't know where to start and where to finish.
I'm going to restate the question. So what I'm really interested in is if you could, like, not thinking so much about the history, but what do you think is at the center of the parkour philosophy or ADD philosophy for you, right? What is your why that gets you up and gets you to practice? And what is the why that you're trying to pass on to your students?
It's kind of an energy and happiness, because the reason why I'm doing all this is because it makes me really happy and kind of really active, and really you feel you're part of something that you don't need to define. You don't need to say this is something and I need to be part of it. You just feel that you're part of something and you feel good there. You're part of the big community, and that's probably the reason, the energy and the happiness, because I feel good sharing all this energy. And with my teaching, I think it's not just, oh, I will teach you how to do this jump or that. I want to give you much more than that. I want to give you energy that you will use, to just break the wall and go from there more forward, and never stop.
So I think happiness is an interesting, when I formed Evolve with Play, so it's about play, right? Well, play is about fun. But it's like, do you just do the thing that's most fun? It's like, well, you're not going to do a lot of stuff. You're only focused on fun. And so I think it's like, it's true to a degree, but it doesn't quite capture it for me. And my challenge for you would be like, do you feel happy when you're at the end of a Laurent style conditioning circuit?
Yes.
Yes. You're failing on your 600th push-up or whatever it is.
That's the thing. You don't
moment happiness for you.
This is the thing. You need to do it certain amount of times, or thousands of times, or something that you kind of overpass that, and then becomes really, becomes that happiness to me. First it was pain, and then it was crying, and it's something else, but then becomes the happiness. It's something that actually, when I connect with, I recently read something that Jan said, and he said something that actually connects with this mind now. And he said, before jump you cry, and after jump you smile. Because when you just think about, if it's the jump that you need to prepare really bad for it, you need to do a lot of conditioning, preparation, you will cry because it's hard, because you need to do a lot of preparation, push-ups and this and that and la la la. But then when you do it, after maybe a year will take you to do that jump, you'll be happy. It's a happiness. It just overtakes all your body, because you know that your time that you invest in that, now it's solved. So I think it's gonna be pain, of course, when you do all these things, but at some point it becomes big happiness. So just across in this direction is a window, and when I look through this window, there is the tallest building in ex-Yugoslavia, Serbia. It's only 31 floor, but it's a good thing, a good story with this building. I was living in that building for a couple of months, and I had the challenge that the time where I was spending there in that building, I said that I want to do one day quadrupede backwards all the way up to the top.
Oh.
To 31 floor. And yeah, it was one day I decided to do it, and then I went, let's go. The rules was no standing up. If I rest on all four, not sitting on the ground, no knees on the ground, and that's it. Like, I start in quadrupede, I need to finish like that with if I make break, it can be, but no standing up and no knees down. And then I did it actually much easier than I was thinking that will be, because I was so happy all the way doing that. I was just, I knew I will do it. I just didn't know how long it will take or how hard it will be. But it was that when you ask, do I feel happy when I do all this repetition? Now I can easily say yes after this period of doing all these things. And I think that everybody kind of needs also to overpass this. I think it's very important and very satisfying thing in life.
Yeah, I have this thing that in order to become great at anything, you have to develop a taste for struggle.
Yeah.
And there's a book I'm reading right now, Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and he talks about the idea of happiness, that if you pursue happiness directly, you never attain it. It's through pursuing something meaningful and struggling towards it that you create the conditions in which happiness can occur.
Exactly.
So for me, like, the central philosophy of parkour practice is intentionally setting out on a meaningful struggle. It's a quest to test yourself in such a way that you gain more meaning from life. and know yourself better.
Yeah, that's exactly why you also need to spend time a lot and train a lot, and that will come.
You can listen to the internal side.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of the why. So then I'm curious what your practice looks like on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, and also what it looks like with your students. Do you still do kind of these 3-hour conditioning sessions, all of the Yamakasi? Is it more technical based? Are you taking up weightlifting and some of the other conditioning ideas that have come into the parkour community from, say, movement culture or strength and conditioning?
Okay, I will actually guide you through all my years of practice, because everything was a kind of different periods. I think all couple of years my way of training changed. I also try not to get caught by, I don't know, some ideas or rules or something. I also tried, I was always training. My first period of training, first years when I was all crazy, first started with the flips, and it was first 2-3 years was only flips mostly. Back I was learning everything at the time, and it was everything outside, so there was no gym and nothing, so it was mostly back flip, front flip, wall flips, everything outside, with no any protection, so it was a lot of injury. So that kind of how it started. From that on, I figure out I don't want to do that anymore, and then I just focused more to kind of movement and flow and breaking the jumps period, I will say. And the time when I start training in different city, when I moved first time, then I trained with other people, so I learned a lot from them. So it was that period when I trained kind of really well, because I had the work, and I also had only 3 to 4 hours limited hours for training every day. So I had this period when I pushed my body a lot and explored in different ways, in physical ways, and trying to do this kind of big stuff at that time. And then I met Laurent and Yamakasi and everybody else, and then my conditioning 2-3 years kind of was on the top at the time, and then also changed to that. It's kind of like water, you know, it's like this and then like that, and it's always changing. And then I had this period of really doing a lot of conditioning with Yamakasi guys, and then in Gerlo with Danish guys, they are doing a lot of conditioning as well. And then after that, I had also kind of crazy period when last 3 years maybe, a lot of underbars, a lot of this kind of creative stuff. But I don't say creative, I'll just say that I kind of limited myself to do something else, like vertical swings, a lot of vertical swing, a lot of underbars, a lot of going through tight spaces, rolls, dive rolls. I don't know, something that kind of went different. And also that was pointed out in last couple of years, it was a long runs distance. Like when I go for a kind of route that I move for a minute, it's quite hard when you go a minute around obstacles and do all the time something. And through all this period, in last 10 plus years of training, there was also constantly running. So I was always running once a week, 2 times a week, 3 times a week. But then eventually I get injured in my Achilles tendon, so I'm not running for the last 2 years now, maybe even a little bit more. But I'm curing it now. It's almost done, so I will back to run very, very, very soon, I hope. And I think this kind of that was the different periods of my practice. At this point is, I think also it's changing. I had some injuries last year and this year, and some complications with different things. So I had the break, I will say, really good break, and felt so good. I think that my body deserved a really good break after so many years doing a lot of things. So I had a quad break. I was training, but not even close as before. And also there's work and other things, but you can always find time for training. If I find time before when I started, I know that I can implement the same idea now. I can organize my time better. So I think this time after this break, last 5-6 months, I had really good break. I was training, but really low intensity. And I think now it's a new period that I will just discover. So I don't know what exactly it is. I know I have some ideas in my head what that is going to be, but not really specific. I figure out that plans are not working for me, and if I want to do exactly something like that, always something happened and that plan changed. So even if I'm planning the training session, for me it doesn't goes always how I was planning. So kind of wild spirit is still there, and I'm really happy because it's like that. So I don't have this worry that I don't know what I'll be doing. So I'm sure that something will pop up, maybe different, maybe old. I'm not really having the trouble thinking about so much that I know something will happen, and I'm happy because of that.
Okay.
Just a feeling.
Yeah. I like to think of plans as sort of points of departure, right? They're not there to tell you exactly what to do. They're there to give you a set of constraints to start working within or to break out of.
Yeah.
But they just make sure that you're doing something if you don't have anything better to do.
Exactly. They also can sometimes work. Yeah. But you mentioned the weights and stuff. I actually never did. I will not say never, because I did gym only when I was doing some recovery.
Yeah.
But I don't like indoor stuff. When I go, I cannot see ADD, art du placement, or parkour being inside. I never was fan of training in the gyms or set up places for training. So my 95% of my training for last 13 years was happening outdoors, and not on the scaffoldings and stuff. It's always in some corner or some wall, whatever, just not on the gym and stuff like that. Except only when I was teaching, of course, then once a week when I had the gym or something, then when we had place where I need to teach, then only was that. But yeah, weight.
That's actually a good question in the what realm, right? So
yeah,
I think of, the why is what is your practice aimed at? The what is kind of the things that actually happen, and then the how is the theory of how you're doing it, of how you're teaching, or of how you're preparing it. So so for me, I agree with you. I don't train really indoors as much as I can avoid it. I do a little bit of weightlifting in my home gym and various things. But a lot of times right now, like I'm doing kettlebell stuff, not because I think kettlebell stuff is like the be all and end all, but just because it's portable and I can take it to my training session, and I can take a break from jumps and do kettlebell swings and single leg deadlifts and stuff like that. So I came from a gymnastics teaching background. I was teaching gymnastics, and then I went into parkour, and I was teaching parkour in my gymnastics gym. And then we started a parkour gym. It was the third parkour gym in North America. And the goal for me was always to prepare people to train outside.
Yeah.
But what happened was that eventually it seemed like everyone started to perceive parkour as a thing that you did at the gym. And I see that happening like all over the community in parkour. There's large populations of people who only do parkour when they're inside. And a lot of people who used to do parkour outside end up spending most of their time training indoors, either because they teach and they're at the gym all the time, or because there's a social element. And I think they just know that if they go to the gym, there's going to be someone there to train with, whereas it takes effort to organize training outside. So I'm curious if you could speak to if you've noticed the same rise of the gym culture, and what do you think is getting lost? Like what is everything? What are we missing when parkour goes from being a practice in the world outside to being a practice in a specific space?
A lot of things. Yeah, I cannot say it's good or bad, but everything have benefits, like we said already before. Training indoor can also be a lot beneficial, especially for example, Scandinavian countries where they have a lot of snow. So you cannot really do all these moves that makes you happy, flying, swings, precision jumps and stuff, you cannot do really that all the time when you have shitty weather all around about year. But I always talk about what is getting lost, because a lot of things are getting lost when you train. If you have possibilities to train outdoor, first, I think the gym is kind of comfort zone, it's always comfort zone, and comfort never goes good. Like if you go back with, if we grow up in comfort zone, I would probably not do parkour, I'll probably do something else. but this comfort zone makes you more lazy, less creative, and so on and so on. What I can point out with training in the area that's built for parkour is that you kind of come there and you will adapt for that, and you will mostly 90% do things that other people do because you see it and you want to try it, and so on and so on. But when you're outside, and of course again the things that you cannot move walls outside to do some jump, that you have this. If you're outside and you want to do this precision jump, if you cannot do it, you need to find somewhere else. So this need to go and find different wall or the how you will prepare your body for this jump is the beautiful journey that you need to take, and not just move the box, and I have it now, and then I will repeat 10 times and then I will do the bigger one. I mean, still can work, it's still beneficial, still good, but I think that's very important to this journey is exactly that you don't have all the tools all the time with you, and you need to develop them, you need to find them, and you need to create them at least, you need to figure out. And that's the beauty, that you don't get so much at same level in the gym or in the setup place comparing to outside. And then outside there are always different occasions. There is and wind and sun and cold and other people and cars and whatever is there. It's always something else that you are getting in your mind, that you're kind of feeling, like I said in the beginning, that you feel the wind is going to the trees, and then I mean, it's cannot really describe it so nice, but I just cannot compare it indoor and outdoor training. I think that lose it so much when you go and put the parkour in the box. Exactly that, you put it in the box, and it should be that something that goes out of the box.
Yeah, life in a box. That's what I'm trying to avoid.
I see what people do, and it's creative and crazy, and they can do a lot of things. And I sometimes when I watch all these indoor videos, say, "Oh, this is nice. I would like to try sometimes inside. It's good." But also, I just prefer being outside.
No.
And it's not about the moves again. It's not about how big is jump and what's the jump. It's just the feeling being outside, holding the branch, climbing the tree, jumping somewhere there. It's not measured. Is it 2.7 or 3 or whatever? It's just a regular jump in a regular day in somewhere in the world.
One way that I like to think about this is like one of my big influences right now is kind of constraints-based theories of teaching. So the idea is that more and more as you develop an athlete, you want to rely on setting up the right constraints in what they're practicing to teach them the right lesson, rather than trying to tell them what's right. And when I took my teaching from being indoors to teaching outdoors, I found that a lot of times the things that I had to teach people indoors, they figured out just inherently outdoors. There's more, and there's this idea that constraints create creativity, right?
Yeah.
You have to think in a different way when you can't adjust the distance of the walls to give you a jump. It's like, well, how do I work up to this jump, knowing that that I can't just move them to make it easier for me. So that this idea of creativity through constraints is important. And then the idea of all the things that you're adapting to, right? You're adapting to being outside. You're adapting to being in the cold. You're adapting to being in the wet. You're adapting to hard surfaces. And those things aren't happening. So it's interesting. I noticed that when you talk about your training, you often refer to moving around in trees. And that's something I obviously enjoy and share. And I've enjoyed some of your videos. I loved your Tarzan video. I was a little jealous. I was like, oh, why didn't they find me out to do that? So I'm curious how you see the balance between training in the urban environment and training in the natural environment as well.
Was it different, or what was exactly the question?
Like, how do you look at that? Training in nature, training in the urban environment. Do you intentionally seek out both? Do you try to find a balance between them? Do you perceive a difference in what you get out of those practices?
I mean, because of my practices, most of the time was in the city for the last 13 years, and I like to jump on the trees in the cities, and that's like something that I was always liking, because it's always different grip, it's always different feeling, it's everything. The bar is always the same, It's always you grab it parallel, it's like this and like this and like this, and then trees like this, la, la, la. So it's a lot of different things. So it's one of the reasons why I like it. And I probably, because of 90% again of my training was in the city for a lot of years, I also try now to go a little bit more and stick to the nature, because I think it's much more challenging. Again, less comfort zone, because now with this practicing so many years in the city becomes kind of comfort, you know.
Yeah.
And you have water here, you have this there, la, 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 you can do this jump here. And then if you go out where there is no obstacles, or there is a 3 rocks and a tree, then it's harder to create your session. Kind of exactly hard as it was when I started doing parkour or ADD, you know, 10, 12 years ago. Because at that time was really challenging and really, that what I said in the beginning of the story, when I was training alone, you go out and then you look and you're thinking what you can do. And that's amazing. That's what bring me here. So I think if I again put my body and mind outside of the comfort zone, something will be created. That's what I said before. I'm not worrying what will happen, because I just need to change something, and then everything else will be there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of, you know, nature has even more constraints in it than the urban environment. There's more things to adapt to. That's the way that I think about it, and I think it's interesting. It seems like that's reflected in the way that you're talking about going into that practice. Despite the fact that I've really only trained in urban environments very minimally over the last 6 years or 7 years, I still find it's easier for me to read an urban environment than a natural environment and actually find what's possible. It's like when you walk through the city, you can see, oh, that's a passable gap, that's a wall run, that's a Kong vault, that's blah blah blah. Whereas when I go into nature, even though that's been my specialty, I find that it takes longer to see what's possible in the environment, and you really have to physically get into the environment. You have to touch it. You have to move around in it in order to start mapping it out, because it's so much more complex. I'm curious if you had that same experience, that like you talked about the idea of, you know, in your early practice, like going out to a spot and not knowing what to do. And then now you know what to do in the urban environment, but when you go into nature, you're still challenged. And I noticed that there's a really interesting aspect of the exploration in nature, taking so much more physical embodiment to actually see what's possible and how intriguing.
Exactly. I will just add to that then, when you mentioned already the Tarzan video that I did a couple years back. That was so challenging thing to do, because the area filmed it in nature. I've never been there before. I don't know that area at all. I just saw it on the picture before and say, I want to go there and film it there. So we have only 3 days or 2 days shooting in the nature, 2 days shooting in the nature. And we filmed everything in 2 days, just jumping from one location to another. And randomly, I was just thrown in in territory where I've never been before. I don't know what the trees are, what the rocks are. And most of the scenes was filmed completely barefoot, and I was like dropping down in some holes, and it was really dangerous in terms, not really kind of, I could injure myself so many times. But I could say that after 3 days, so 2 days filming, but we spent 3 days in nature. After 3 days, I felt much different. I felt so good, and I felt, okay, I'm getting into it now. Yeah. You know, and I was barefoot for 3 days, and then I had a little bit pain, of course, on my foot, because I was dropping a lot on rocks and stuff. But after 3 days, I felt much more, you know, like more welcome to the nature and more feel better.
Yeah.
Happier.
Yeah. Where was that filmed?
Slovenia.
Okay, cool. So not too far.
Slovenia is magic. Yeah, not too far. We drive all day to come there, but it's something that's really, really magical. You need to go there. You will like it.
Sounds great. Okay, so that's kind of
And then let me just ask you what your classes look like now. So if we show up for a class, is it an hour long? Is it an hour and a half long? How do you divide it between conditioning, technical approach? How do you bin the different parts of the practice?
At the moment, I'm not teaching. I'm also taking a break. So before I answer you this question, I will also tell you something about teaching, because how I like to teach is because I'm teaching for the last 10 years. It's going to be 10 years now. I try not to teach too much. Why? I also always have limitations when I was teaching, when I was holding classes in Serbia and Croatia. It was never more than 3 times per week or 4 max. And the reason why I did this, first is I don't want this to become my regular job, because I want to keep the passion on all the time. When I teach, I like to give a lot of, I scream, I yell, I'm happy, I'm smiling and everything, and I'm all in. When I'm teaching, I want to share everything that I have. And for me, it's important to have for every class a lot of energy. So I never choose to teach more than this in a week, except when I was in America for 3 months and I was teaching every day. But that was very exhausting. So this is my kind of rule that's not written, but it's kind of rule that I don't want to teach more than this, because I want to keep the fire alive, and I want always to give something to these people. So that's the reason also why I did much more workshops in last couple of years in comparing to the classes. I'm now actually will start to do more classes here in Belgrade in Serbia with Parkour Serbia, but also same rule will be applied, not a lot of coaching. This is actually something that I also did learn from past. I always want to do other things in my life as well, so that's why I started a clothing company, and I did a lot of other things to earn money, because I didn't see myself living from coaching, and I didn't want to see myself coaching so much to that kind of, the be only source for income. And then I couldn't rely on that. Then I could see my future in the term I will be doing something, and maybe I will not like it at some point because it's going to be so stressful, go every day and teach 20, 30 people and so on and so on. So that's one kind of rule. And what's my class about? It's depends of the environment all the time, of course. But it's always need to be some, it doesn't need to be, it's always need to be energetic, I will say. It's a lot of, is it hard conditioning, or is it technique team, or is long movements? I always like to point out some weaknesses and to find some weaknesses in the group and try to push that. If you understand, like if you as a group, if you find that something is missing, that we try to get around that and then push that as a group, whatever the topic is. Is it the conditioning? Is it the technique or something like that? And yeah, I mean, it's a lot of depends of where we are and what are the, is it a workshop? Is it a regular class in the regular city with the people that already did many classes, or are complete beginners? So I cannot really give you the strict answer to that, because it really depends.
Okay, cool. So then the last kind of subject would be the how of practice. And this is something that I'm really interested in right now, which is the pedagogy of how people try to get skills developed. How do we get people to be able to do something? How do you think about the role of the teacher, how the teacher works with the student, and how to kind of create a successful relationship that goes forward? So I'm curious what your philosophy or your method is as far as how you think about what makes an effective approach to helping people attain skill in this art.
I will maybe have a bit old school approach to this, because I learned in this kind of way, and I also believe this is also still key for this era at the moment. It's kind of you need to, and we need to have coaches, or we need to be coaches that we can influence other people. Still, we are still first generation rolling around, kind of training this new thing that's called ADD or parkour, and we need to show things all the time, and we need to be able to do it before we just told them to do it. You know, it's like ballet that exists more than 100 years or something. And I think that this influence, it's very important at the moment to have, like, it's how I started this interview. It's with my father. I saw him to do all this thing, and I wanted to do it, and I see it's possible, and if I dedicate my time, I will do it. I think it's similar philosophy is our job as teachers, coaches, assistants, whatever we are. We need to be able to understand what we're doing, to show what we're doing, maybe not using any names. And then for them and for everybody else who is trying to teach this, it will teach first for watching what we're doing and then using all the advices. I think that's very important, that the quality, and not just quality, the success, the percentage of success will be depending of how coach or how the person will show what you can do somehow. What are you doing, how you're doing things, and then the visual first and then everything else. I think very important, because it's a lot of topics about this in the parkour world. Can we teach from the chair, or do we need to know all the things before we show them? I think yes. I think yes still, and then sometimes in the future everything will be much different. But at this point now, I think still we need to be very, visual. You need to show them as much as you can and explain, following that visual explanation, and then I think the success will be very high.
Yeah, I think of this as I kind of break down the roles of the coach into a few different areas. But one of the areas that I think about is aspirational leadership. So it's showcasing what the process can become for you. So when I'm teaching, especially at workshops, I will make sure to find some jumps that I know will be really inspiring to the students. And then I'll do them, and I'll showcase my process of going through something that's difficult and hard, and dealing with fear. So I think of that as the aspirational leadership thing. I think it's an interesting thing because one of the things that I see with the teaching community is some teachers are really good at this, and some teachers don't do it at all. But when you do it, the issue is that you can get caught into the energy of your own training, and you can then let it pull you out of attending to the needs of the students, right? It's like you can be there showcasing yourself, and it can become a show rather than a element of show that supports a total approach to actually managing the outputs for the students for their purpose. How do you think about finding that balance?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, with probably with time and probably with being aware of this is experience. It comes with experience. I think everybody, we went through this phase when you caught yourself, oh, maybe I'm too much enjoying in this now, and maybe I need to dedicate more time to the students. But I got myself there, of course, before, and then when you realize it, I mean, I'll put it like this: when you know what is the problem, then it's easy to solve it. You need to know how to work on things. Like if it's the same, you can apply the same thing in your jump. So if you're doing something and you cannot succeed, and then if you try to figure out where is the problem, why you cannot do it, then maybe I just need to bend this arm like this, and then okay, I will work on that. And then if you focus and work on bending that arm, and then you will do it. If you know where is the problem, you will work on the problem, and then you will solve it. It's same for this. If you need to be aware of situation. If you know that if you're aware that you're showing off, then you will stop, of course. I mean, you will move more energy to them, or opposite. If you are too much talking about this, and maybe I will need to show as well, so they have visual about this, and then it's everything always about balance, right?
So one of the things that I think about with with demonstration also is humans overgeneralize. They will mimic more. So if you show if you show a child a motor task, and say you're opening something up, right, that has a resource in it, and you do a couple things that have nothing to do with getting the lid open, the child will replicate the entire sequence. If you show it to a chimpanzee, the chimpanzee won't imitate the nonsense, and they'll go straight to the solution. And this turns out to be absolutely key to how humans learn. Because we overgeneralize and we imitate much more effectively, we can pick up like a broader set of memes. I can't explain it articulately right now, but this is actually somehow key to human learning. But I actually think there's a trap here in when you're teaching, that the students start to reflect things about the teacher that aren't actually in service to the students.
Yeah, I understand.
And so one thing that I do is I try not to demo in the beginning of the process unless it's necessary. If there's a way to show them, if there's a way to explain it to them and give them an opportunity to try it, and then to join them and let them see my movement, not as a example of the right way to do it necessarily, but as someone participating in the process, I find that that's really, it helps avoid this trap. I'm curious if you've thought about that balance between the value of demonstration and the potential.
Yes,
pull
exactly.
Away.
Yeah, it's amazing. So there is before it runs away. What I was going to say. Okay, there is. I had two things, but one just fly to the window, I think. One of the oh my God, I remember.
Take your time. Take a deep breath. Having a conversation.
Maybe, yeah. But anyway, one of the things, the second one, first one I lost. The second one is one of the things when I teach is on the beginning or ever, I try not to use names of the techniques, because that definitely creates some imagery in their heads before they even try. So I saw that works really well. So if you say somebody will do dive Kong today, blah, blah, then if people understand that language and if they understand what that means, they will imagine something that it's scary, or, oh, I saw that on YouTube. And then they directly get some fear from that and kind of some distance. So I try to not use really names. I'm trying to explaining and showing, like you said. So I think the best way is when they trying to figure out on their own how to do it without using it. If you say maybe they will not do Kong at all, they maybe do something differently, completely something else, and that's even better then. So one of the things that I'm trying to do really minimum. If I use names, I will use some simple like a precision or something. But like if it comes to the more complicated stuff, I try not to use technique, because I want to see them developing using the magic, doing something what their body said to do or what they had in their heads to do it on that obstacle. So I think that's very.
I have this analogy about the names. So the way I understand it is that the French guys didn't use a lot of names, and then the English guys, when they saw the French guys, they were trying to sort of translate it through a computer, and I think it ends up kind of being a verbal thing, right? Rather than seeing and feeling, you're expressing it in words. And I think there was an influence, I think, from skateboard culture. And so now you ended up with this big list of names, and it was sort of perceived as a set of tricks that you're acquiring. And I think that this becomes a bit of a mistake. The way that I tend to think about it, like people often ask me, if you can only have, like, what's your favorite move, or you can only have one move, what would it be? And it's like, well, that's like asking a poet what the best letter in the alphabet is. Right?
Exactly.
What I think about the movement, what I think about the individual techniques is that they're like They're like tools that a carpenter uses. But the goal isn't to have a bigger tool belt. The goal is to be able to do carpentry.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Not to invent new letters. It's to be able to write poetry. But I still think it's useful to be able to have very clear language once the underlying structure.
Yeah, again, you just need to know how to use it, when to use it, and if you balance it very well, it works even better. I think it's something that teachers definitely need to think about and to start applying it, because, or start less applying the names, because it will definitely be beneficial. How I discovered this, it's actually on the first year of my teaching. First year I was using all the names that we had, like, because our planning program was on the names. So this month we'll do this technique, this month we'll do this technique, blah 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 blah. And then next year I just put the names out. Like, I will not do the names, I will do the same kind of way of planning, but no names, and worked much better. I really liked it. Yeah.
How do you measure better? What does better mean?
I mean, better means they energy was better. Maybe I don't using the right words in English, but like, everything was kind of, more people did it earlier. We proceed to next things. Some people did differently. Some,
faster.
Progression and diversity. It was like much more things was happening. So more beautiful to watch, and was more natural to be in it. Like, as a coach, everything was better for me in that terms, when I said better, because but that works at the time. And then kind of I still use names, of course, but not as much, probably, that some other coaches doing.
Yeah, when you over specify information in training, you prevent the athletes from self-organizing and engaging in their own process, and you prevent the opportunity for them to express creativity. So it gets really rote and boring. So you get more energy when you give people a little bit more space to play with it.
Exactly. Yeah, you're good with words, man. I can just start to the sentence, and then you can like make it sound really nice. I can never do that.
Well, it's my native language, right? So
yeah.
Well, I think this is a good time for us to kind of close the interview. It's just about out of time. But thank you very much. If people are interested in knowing more about your work or checking out what you do, where should they look for you?
Is that a question?
That's a question. Where should people find you?
Facebook or Instagram, probably, but I'm not really active in last 6 months again. During this break, I will probably be back more being active, but also maybe that will not be a case. I'm not sure. But yeah, Instagram, Facebook, my last name and the first name. Also, yeah, they can always check the website, Skotchipsticks, if they can find it. It's a bit challenging. It's on purpose like that. I can tell a short story about that before we finish. Skotchipsticks. Exactly. Yeah, this also can be a homework for you, man. Because a name is actually created to be an obstacle for a tongue.
Tongue parkour.
Yeah, Scotchy means a jump in our language, but chipstick doesn't mean anything. It's just made up word to be. So we added a suffix to be obstacle for pronouncing. It's hard for even us in like this region that word doesn't exist. So Skotchipsticks is a tongue obstacle, yeah, as you said.
Skotchipsticks. Yeah. Very Slavic.
It's just another obstacle, Everything that we do in our life is just overcoming obstacles on every level, and then why not put another one, just one more?
So yeah, people can check out Scotty's nice clothes. You sent me some.
Yeah, but somehow, because this is the same thing, you can observe it. Like, people train outdoor, and then because it becomes not so comfy, they go indoor. That was with Skotchipsticks was not so comfortable. Then Scotchy is more comfortable. So that's why everybody are calling Scotchy and not Skotchipsticks, because maybe they're lazy or I don't know.
We just shorten everything anyways.
Yeah.
Okay, man. Well, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for hosting me. Not in person. Next time, let's do it in the woods or somewhere by the lake or something like that. It would be much more fun.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Cheers, man.
Thank you for listening to the Evolve, Move, Play podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave a review on iTunes if you can. Finally, as we mentioned before the show, this is a listener-supported podcast, and if you want to have the most regular content, have the best guests on, and give you guys the best quality of audio and video, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Thank you very much, and I look forward to sharing more with you guys soon.